Hello, this is Jane from Hobby Ceramicraft. Today we're going to paint this project here. So we are going to be using the Mako silkscreens and Mako stroke and coat and Mako's silkscreen media. So to start off with, we need to take our tuxedo, give it a good old shake and mix up with some silkscreen media. So a little bit of paint and then a nice pinch of silkscreen media. Now remember to put the lid back on. I'm quite good at knocking that over, so I'll just put the lid back on, and then I'm going to use my finger and I'm just going to mix the silkscreen media with my finger. Now with the Mako silkscreens, when you pick them up, you'll feel that they have a shiny side and a not so shiny side. So when we're working with them, we want to make sure that the shiny side is against the pottery. Now this is quite tricky to see the silkscreen, the actual design on this one. So what you can do is you can get a dry marker pen and you can draw over the silkscreen, over the shiny side. You can scribble all over it and then you can wipe it off with a piece of kitchen roll and then you'll be able to see the lines. So on this one here we can see all the details because that's what I've done. On this little guy here you can't see the design because I haven't used the dry marker on it. So what I was doing there was just allowing the silkscreen media just to soak into the paint and it all to make this lovely toothpaste type consistency. Now my piece of pottery, I would have taken a damp sponge with water and I would have sponged it off before I started work, removing any cardboard or ceramic dust that there might be on the piece. And I've also got clean hands, so I'm not wearing hand cream and I haven't been eating any naughty snacks like crisps or biscuits. So I'm just going to place the shiny side against the pottery and then using my finger I'm pushing the paint through the silkscreen. And there we have it. Now the nice thing about these silkscreens is that I can pop it down and do it again. And then do it again. So I'm going to say I'm done with this. So I'm just going to pop this in a bowl of water and I'm going to leave it in the bowl of water. Now this is a regular way of using silk screens. We can go ahead and we could paint straight away now with stroke and coat and start colouring in this colouring page that we've created. But what I think is quite cool is if we fire it to a cone 06, the lines are fixed and they won't wash off. So if you make a mistake. But before we come to the firing part of it, where we've got paint where we don't want it, I can just get a damp sponge and I can just wash it off. And black is probably the worst colour to wash off because it does stain and leave a mark behind. But if it does leave a bit of a mark, if we make that area bigger, we can use a paintbrush and we can just wiggle some water around in that area and it does dissipate the colour and it just completely disappears. Now before we pop that in the kiln, if we still saw a mark, we have a sanding pad that we could just, once the surface is dry, we could sand any additional marks off. Now when we're using this particular bisque import shape, it has a hanging hole on the back, and do take a moment to look where that is before you do the design. My hanging hole was here, and on this one it would hang from that point and they'd be slightly drunk, wouldn't they? So this is just my test piece. But silkscreen your design on and then pop it in the kiln to a cone 0.6 and fire it, and it comes out like this. And like this, none of the black lines come off. So we can make a mistake on our piece and we can wash it off and it's not going to disturb the black lines. So it's a true colouring book piece. This one, I did get the hole in the right place, so we're sorted on that, the hole's in the right place. Now we can just colour this in. Beforehand, I might think about what words I want to put on the piece. So on a desktop publishing program, I printed the words keep safe, stay gnome, and using my clay carbon paper, I'm going to just quickly transfer those on. So the words were created on Word and they were curved to the right shape. I cut them out, fold them in half. I look at my plate, I realise that that's where the centre point is. Put my template down, then using the clay carbon paper with the this way up stamp on it, I'm just going to slide the clay carbon underneath. Okay, so we've traced our lettering on and now we can start painting. This is the fun bit. So I'm using the Mako stroking coat and giving them a little bit of a shake before I start, and I'm going to just squeeze the colour onto a ceramic tile. And this is just the fun bit. The colours themselves, when you apply them in one coat application, they're going to look a little bit wishy-washy. If you do 2 to 3 coats, it's going to give you a bit more of a solid opaque coverage. We kind of want to do this as just a relaxation, so we're going to go for a one coat application, knowing that it's going to be a little bit streaky, and I'm going to add a little bit of water so it flows nicely, but I'm going to puddle the colour in a little bit. So I've got a nice soft, I think it's a pony hair brush here. I've added some water, well, I've just swished it in the water to make sure there's no other paint being left in it from the last use, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water to it, so it's like a thick watercolour paint. Now the black is the strong colour, so that's going to come through, so I can paint over my black lines, and I can puddle the colour in, and you can just play with the colour. So I'm going to do all my centres with number 6, Sunkissed. So when I applied my flower silkscreen, I twisted and turned the silkscreen so that the flowers weren't all coming at it from the same direction. And you can see some little stalks on this plate from the silkscreen. Now I did use sellotape to mask the bottom half of the silkscreen because the whole flower that I used was this one here, and it has a whole stem on it. So on the shiny side of the silkscreen I put a bit of sellotape over the leaves so that I didn't accidentally get lots of leaves on my plate. So we could, if we're feeling like we want to do a little bit of extra shading, where we have one coat of the Tutu Tango, we can go back and we can just put an extra coat, but just not all over it. No petal is really solid opaque when you look at it, is it? So if we have different applications of paint, we're going to see different thicknesses of paint, and it's going to be different strengths of colour. So it's going to look a bit like a dappled petal. And we can add, so, you know, I've got a few white areas there, so I don't know whether they are orange or whether they are red flowers, but I've just tried to fill in some of the white areas with a little bit of paint there. Now, with the centres of the flowers, we can use a tiny bit of crackerjack, number 25, and just to create a little bit of shading and help define the centres of the flowers. I've washed the brush, I've added a tiny little bit of water to it, and then I'm just stippling a little bit of a little bit of this brown in the centres of the flowers, and hopefully it should help the yellow, the sun-kissed, just pop out a little bit by giving a little bit of shade. It does seem to help the bright colours. Sometimes the bright colours just need a little bit of a contrast, and they look a tiny bit brighter, I feel. So we put in a little bit of the brown in the centres there, the flowers. And if we wanted to, we could also add a little bit of shading into the petals if you wanted to, but I think I'm happy with the way that it's looking right now. Okay, so I've still got a little bit of the crackerjack on my brush, so I'm just going to paint the little guy's shoes. He's going to have some brown shoes. So now we're going to look at the grass area. So I've got 3 greens. I've got Just Froggy. Oops. I've got Just Froggy, which is the dark green. I've got Green Thumb, which is a medium green. And then I have got Honeydew List, which is a nice pale one. Oh, I didn't shake that. Let's give that a shake. So around my flowers, I'm going to put some shading in. So maybe I'll start with the lighter green. Added some water to the colour, and I'm just going to paint a wash. Got the Honeydew List in the background as a dappled watercolour effect, and we're carrying on with a little bit of the Green Thumb. And we can go over the light green with our middle green, because the darker colours cover the light. So we can allow some of the light to peek through, and it doesn't matter if we cover it. And now I'm going to go for a little bit of the darker green. I'm not going to have as much of the darker green, and I'm going to try and focus on getting it close to the flowers or in the depth of the design, where the shadow might be. Let's add some colours, some extra colours for our gnomes. We have got Cinnamon Sticks, number 81. So this is like a brown, a nice red-brown colour. And I have got Cafe au lait, number 92. So this is a browny grey colour. I'm using the colour out of the 8-ounce bottles. And then this is number 20, which is called Cassulator. You might have number 20 with the name Birthday Suit on yours, but the most recent name of that is Cassulator. Now we can add other colours into that. So let's give some highlights with the yellow. So we can just put a little bit of, just brush little bits of yellow in there. So that'll give her a little bit of a yellowy tinge, a little blondie tinge when it's fired. And then with the little guy, let's take some of the crackerjack and we'll just streak a few bits of that in there. It just makes it look a little bit more interesting. It's not too flat. Nobody's going to see every single brush stroke, so it looks quite cool. I noticed I missed a bit, so I'll go back and just pick up that little bit of green that I missed on his sleeve. Now the ground that they're standing on, that looks a little bit boring, so let's go for the light grey, the cafe au lait, and let's turn the piece around so it's easy, and then we'll put a little bit of ground in there. We had a little bit of the lightest green in there, but we've just put a bit of ground in, and I'm just dabbing it around, aren't I? It's not any specific brush stroke at all. And maybe we can have some of the crackerjack as well. We'll put some of that in there as well, make it look a little bit interesting. I love this colour. It's nice warm colour. And so it doesn't look too muddy. How's about a bit of the middle green as well? So we'll put a little bit of middle green in there. And hopefully that should look a little bit interesting. And let's create a little bit of sky. So this is Periwinkle Twinkle. A little bit of Periwinkle Twinkle, which is a nice light blue colour. And going back to the middle size brush, a little bit of that light blue. Make it into a watercolour effect. And again, we're just scribbling the background in, really, just breaking it up, adding a little bit of water to the paint, and then taking it into the bushes a little bit and scooting it around just so the background doesn't look too flat and boring. And you could add some bumblebees in here, or birds in the sky, or hot air balloon, whatever you fancy, just to break. But I just like a little bit of blue, it just breaks it up. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the Mako script liner brush, CB106, adding a little bit of water to the dark green, the number 8, Just Froggy. I'm just going to make that into a nice brushable consistency, and I'm going to do the writing with this brush. It looks a bit scary because it's quite a big flat end. It's not got a point, has it? But you can see I've got the brush fully loaded with paint. Very important, it's fully loaded. I'm going to touch the brush down onto the tile so I get a bit more of a point. Using my little finger for support, I'm going to write over my tracing, and I'm writing with a blob of paint. So I'm doing this with a paintbrush, but you could equally well do this with a writer bottle, and I'll show you a writer bottle in just a second. But look, my little finger is always there for support. So you can always practice first before going on to the piece with the paintbrush. You need a nice paintbrush. I'm not going back and reloading. I'm not using a tiny paintbrush where I have to go back and reload for every single letter. I'm using a liner brush, a script liner, and that allows me to keep on painting, which helps me keep the style of the letters in keeping, and you're not seeing as many hesitation marks as you might do. And then with a colour of your choice, I'm going to use the sponge, and I can sponge around the edge, and I like the dark green on here. I think it finishes it really quite nicely. So just sponge the colour onto the edge of the piece, and then it just frames the piece. So this is the piece before it's fired. So I will need to dip it or brush it in clear glaze, and then it needs to be fired to a cone 06, which is 1000 degrees centigrade. And it'll take about 8 hours to reach temperature. So that's before, and then this is the magic of what happens in the kiln. That's after it's fired. All these colours would be dinnerware safe, and you'd be able to eat food from that should you wish. Now, you could, instead of using a paintbrush, you could use a writer bottle to do the lettering. So it's important not to lose the pin. Pop the pin in the newsprint. You can see the paint isn't in the nozzle yet, is it? So we need to make sure the paint comes down the nozzle. And the neat thing about working on newspaper or newsprint is that we can practice on the paper. So this bottle's been around a little while, so we need to just clear it. So we can just practice. You can practice on the paper, and then you could, instead of using a paintbrush, you could just write with the writer bottle, which is quite fun. So you need to make sure you put the pin back in, of course, after each use. And the writer bottles come in two different shapes. This is AC222, and we also have one that fits better in your hand, which is an AC219. Now that is one project version. Why not take it bigger? And you could do a family plate marking this particular moment in time. You could use your writer bottle, and you could write on there your family name, and when the world stayed apart, we came together, or when the world stayed apart, we stayed gnome. That would be quite fun. Paint mummy, daddy, children, do a dog, cat, elephant, whatever you got at home.